Oh, it's hot. Oh, it's cold. Climate change. What do you think? I personally think the climate changes all the time. I don't think we live long enough to suggest we have any relative knowledge about climate change in our lifespan. 100 years goes like that. Give you an example, and these are facts, I'm not making this up. In the time of the dinosaurs, the temperature was 2 degrees hotter on average than it is now. 2 degrees. Can climate change occur rapidly? Certainly can. We're 100 degrees here a couple of days ago, and now it's about 65. What I mean by that is that you're looking at the variables of where you live. I had a friend recently who moved to the other side of the mountains, just east of Perth, and he tells me climate change is definitely real because it's 10 degrees hotter out here. But when he drives down the mountain on the west side, it's 10 degrees cooler. He admitted that basically, yeah, it's hotter where he lives. Microclimates. I used to live about 30 miles away from here, and it's probably on average during the day 3 or 4 degrees cooler during the day, about the same temperature at night. Variables about where people live. Well, most of the people on the planet now live in the suburbs, urban if you like, near the coast. I'll give you an idea. If the sea level rose about 50 feet in Australia, 10 million people would be homeless. And things like sea level rise, well, it happens. I believe since the turn of the century, in other words 1900 till now, it's risen probably about a foot, or maybe a bit less. But they're marginal. When you think about what people do when that occurs, they build levees, barriers. That's happening all over the world. So is climate change, as you read in the newspapers, real? Not really. A lot of nonsense here, people for and against it. The fact is the climate is always changing. There's not a year goes by they think it's a bit warmer this time of year than normal. But like I say, we do not live long enough to suggest that we have the knowledge in our lifetime that we can say, oh, definitely climate change it's occurring. It's an ongoing process on the planet, depending. I'll give you a good example that when I was a young boy and in class we had a man who was Indonesian, an old man, Bernard Timmerman. I've got a fairly good memory, that was his name. And he used to tell stories about when he was in Indonesia. He told one story one day about how his grandparents, and that takes them back to like the 1850s, because he was pretty old when I was a kid. So his grandfather basically witnessed and heard Krakatoa explode, the volcano in Indonesia. And that was in 1883. Now, what happened around the planet, if you remember stories like they were ice skating on the Thames in London, it's true. That definitely did occur. The same year, crops around the world were failing for a couple of years because they weren't getting the appropriate sunlight. But the temperature did not drop enormously. You know, it was a very cold winter in 83, 84 in the UK, and they did skate on the River Thames. But that's a variable, so that happened for a couple of years, and crops were lost around the world. If a massive volcano erupted today, the same thing would occur. But I was born in 1959, and when I was born there was just under 2 billion something amount of people on the earth. Today, in 2017, there's 7.5 billion people. And you'll often read reports that people in the city say it's getting hotter and hotter. It is indeed hotter in the city because of all the concrete, all the bitumen, and basically absorbs all that heat. And many people that do live in cities tell me that at night time during summer it's unbearable, it doesn't cool down. That's because they've got like a thermal block of concrete and bitumen all around them. There are a few good cities in Perth that have loads, in Australia. Perth's one of them, have a lot of trees. But a lot of the bigger cities, it's just a concrete jungle. That would explain the rise in temperature, and you can do your own research online. That's a fact. Urban living increases the temperature where you live. But There's a climate change about to occur, because I'm going to have myself a Guinness. Of course, I can't drink it straight away because it has to settle. I'll share it with you. I know I'm going to enjoy it. There we go. So, what do you people think about climate change and all the nonsense that goes on in the media, panicking and what's going on? Climate change is real. It occurs. It's occurred all the way through the history of this planet. There are more people. To give you an example, when tornadoes go through the US, hundreds of people get killed, and it's a terrible tragedy. There's no doubt about that. But if you go back 60 years, there was a lot less people living in that tornado belt, and less people died. It's a mathematical equation. There are more than double the amount of people in Australia than when I was born, which means they fill up a lot more space. And when a tragedy, a flood, cyclone, hurricane, tornadoes, tsunamis, when they now occur, unfortunately, we lose more people. So what is the major problem on this planet is not climate or its changing habits of temperature, but the amount of people we have on the planet. And I'm not advocating we get rid of them, but there has to be some very hard thought in the near future in regards to how do we control the population on this earth. China went through a process of only one-child policy. You'll get people for and against this, and the ones that are against it are like, that's not free will, and I can't have X amount of children because you're now telling me I can't. But if they think generationally ahead, let's double the time limit, and you can multiply that by 4. In 60 years, there'll be over 25 to 30 billion people on this planet. Can we feed them? Probably. But let's be honest, we can't feed 2 or 3 billion of them now. They're starving all over the planet. In cultures and in affluent third world countries, they seem to do okay. But the fact is that many of these other countries just get forgotten. You know, and in the climate change policies, like in the Paris Agreement, there's payments for these sort of countries, like some of the islands in the South Pacific are disappearing. But no good giving someone $100,000 in their pocket and then giving them a boat saying, sorry, you've lost your island. So it's not so much a case of we'll see levels rise, probably, and they'll fall. We could go through an ice age, or we could go through a blistering period of heat. There could be a massive volcano, like I say, go off, and that will certainly affect a lot of people. Krakatoa in 1883 affected everybody on the planet, but in 1883 there was less than 1 billion people on here. There are now 7.5 billion. And I did see recently a clock about the world's population. You can't keep up with it. It just flies along. So climate change is real in the effect that this planet, you know, develops. It has periods where it gets hotter and colder. I think the extreme colds that are obviously fact, like the ice ages, occur. And just because we're here now doesn't mean they're not going to occur again. Is it going to happen tomorrow? I don't think so. But it will happen. Will we have periods on this planet when the temperature is unbelievably hot? Yes, I think that will happen too. But the issue of the planet in itself, the planet has no problem. The planet deals with whatever's occurring and just ticks along, changing at its own pace. It's humans that get affected by the variances in temperature. So what does that mean? Well, I do think we have to start thinking about population. And I'm not saying eliminating anyone. I think Mother Nature will take care of some of those issues. Trust me. If you crammed, 40 pigeons into a little box, they're not all going to survive. Mother Nature will kick in with some disease or respiratory problem. In my lifetime, I've seen things like SARS and all those respiratory issues that people face. In Melbourne, a couple of years ago, they had a storm with a whole heap of dust that came off the desert and caused people to die. I think 9 or 10 people died through an asthmatic attack. And some of these people had never had asthma. So that was a lower respiratory, not just the upper, like some asthmatics had, but deep into the lungs, embedded with all this very micro particles. So is the issue of having the nonsense being shown to you like that climate change is real? It is real. But the variance in temperatures they're talking about each year, you'll say the same thing I do, think, oh, this is a bit colder this year, or it's a bit hotter. But again, I'll reiterate, we do not have a lifetime long enough to actually give a fair indication of like, oh yeah, 300 years ago when I was here, it certainly wasn't this hot, because that's nonsense. And humans, like everything else on this planet, adapt. People that live in Australia regularly have temperatures over 100 degrees, and there are a few places in the US that temperatures do reach that for sure. But my whole country, all of Australia gets that hot. And we are accustomed and acclimatised to it. I often get people come from the UK or the US and they say how unbearably hot it is. Well, we recently went to Thailand and it was a lot cooler than when we left Australia, but it was more humid. Another variance in temperature based on the fact of humidity. You know, people will say, oh, it's really, really hot, but in fact it's only like, 80 degrees, but it's a lot more in humidity. So when you think about the issue of climate change, think in perspective of who is it affecting. It's not affecting the planet. The planet can be 500 degrees. Wouldn't worry the planet. But the humans that are on it have the issue. And the disasters that are unfolding every year now are horrific. And like I say, I'm not a eugenic. I'm not into eugenics of like, let's get rid of 100,000 people and do things like that, because that's not me. But a realistic approach to population control has to come, irregardless of the temperature of the planet. I could say in 60 years' time, 50, 60 years' time, there'll be close to 30 billion people. And we can't feed all the ones we've got now. We probably could if everyone wasn't so damn selfish and corporate companies didn't take all the profits and not share it with the people that have nothing. But I hope you have a bit of a think about climate change and how it's presented to you in the media, because a lot of the time it's just nonsense. It's fear-mongering, it's politicians talking bullshit and wanting to tax people more. What's the point of taxing everybody for a climate change? What do you do with the money? Give it to somebody else, like maybe keep it for themselves? Anyway, just want to give you a thought process in regards to what I think climate change is. It is real. It changes all the time, be it man-made or man-made contributory to the increase or decrease of temperature, or the planet itself. There's been plenty of historical facts that anthropologists can tell you that the variance in temperature has been ongoing. But I'll take you back to the dinosaur story at the start. Millions of years ago, when the dinosaurs were here and we were not here, the temperature was about 2 degrees warmer. That's all. So the biggest threat to humankind is not increase in temperature by marginal degrees, but a rapid frozen planet. That this has been many times, 6, 7 times, I think, at least, if not a lot more. So I wouldn't worry about climate change. More to the point of what I've been sort of indicating, it's the population of this planet that gets affected by lack of food, excess urban build-up. You know what I'm talking about, all these buildings going up with people living like pigeons in them. That's not natural. And when you put enough people in a tight spot, conflict. So do I know the answer to the world's population problems? Not really. But I do know that something has to be done and people have to come together and collectively say, we need to do something. Anyway, if you have been listening, I thank you for that, but I'm going to have a sip of my Guinness now. And just wanted to provoke thought, what your thoughts are on climate change. Or is that not really the issue? Is it population growth? Anyway, if you have been watching, thank you. Until next time, see you later.